I'm Kristin Dennehy. Herbert Mines is focused specifically on fashion, retail, and consumer goods. And our belief is that due to our focus and our 37 years in business, we are able to develop relationships with candidates and clients, which is much different than just sort of assessing and interviewing. So because of this really tight focus, we've been able to develop relationships with a lot of people who do what you do, whether they're managers of talent acquisition or chief HR officers. And I know that you have a lot of roles to fill in a short time to do it, but what we wanted to, Sacha and I, be helpful in talking about today is culture fit in assessments and emphasize developing relationships with candidates as the best way to really get to know them. So at our firm, we have a success factor around what we're trying to determine as fit. So even though this is our approach in how we interview and assess, I would say the focus with what I wanted to cover today is more the company environmental and the 360-degree view from blind referencing as a way to really get to culture fit. So this comes down to the company culture, and no one knows more about your company culture than all of you, but I just want to challenge you into if you're really digging into your needs in your own company culture in terms of how you're interviewing. So our deep dive into culture determines, together with our clients, a set of key competencies to measure against and a unique manner to deeply reference. So in terms of the company environmental, we encourage our firm to spend a lot of time within the culture, and this isn't just to ask questions. This is about really understanding what it is to be there, to feel the culture, to interact with the people, to ask access, to be inside of the environment. Does it feel like a closed door office environment? Is it an open air environment? What is it like when people interact with each other in the lunchrooms, in the fitness centers? What does it feel like to be there? So we feel like our interviewing style is a lot more around, yes, the assessment that you all do pretty quickly to determine if the competencies are there in terms of their tools and their skills, but it's a lot more about the feel. So I'd encourage you to think about, are you going out to see it and feel it inside of your company? Are you operating too high level and not getting into the departments that you're trying to interview for? Are you actually thinking like we do and conducting your own client environmental? Sometimes you may have been at the company for a very long time and really just think you understand the culture. The other thing that we would encourage is that when you're interviewing candidates, it's just as important to put yourself out there and connect with people and get to know them and develop a relationship through that interview, even if that person doesn't end up being your candidate. We find that the soft skills and the behaviors in the interview process get us down to culture fit a lot more than the accomplishments and the professional experiences. So I think that most of the candidates that I interview and all my clients know that I have 2 children, I live on Long Island, I love to ski and be on the water, and get it to a level where we're talking about each other and our lives. And I think through that, you get a much better candidate experience. You're developing relationships, not just contacts, and you're going to get the level of candor you're looking for when you're speaking to these candidates. So that is a lot about putting yourself out there to kind of get back what you're looking for. These are some examples of kind of companies and clients where we feel comfortable telling you the importance of culture fit and the different things that we've had to solve for. And they're all very different and much different skills and attributes that we were looking for. So not going to talk about all of them, but you can see they're all very different kinds of companies. So Pier 1, we got the challenge when this $2 billion public company, very formal Dallas, Texas-based company culture, and the president, the CEO we were replacing had overseen 13 straight quarters of declining same-store sales. So we spent time with the board, with the senior team, and realized that they needed a CEO who would change the culture and the behaviors, not adapt to what existed and what had been there with a lot of 20-year tenured people there. And the guy that came in, Alex Smith, came from a large company. He had turnaround experience. He wasn't afraid to make change. He was impatient, actions, results oriented, and he ended up changing the entire senior team other than 2 people. That was a very different experience than when we did the CEO search for Reef, where the client environmental meant hanging out with the founders in San Diego at their home in flip-flops and shorts and getting to know the needs of the private equity firm that owned the company. And the idea here was to find a candidate where we could prove out that this person could drive results and also lead a culture where literally people in the company went out to catch a wave at lunch, no exaggeration. The guy we found, Dave Gatto, had a very easygoing style, but his professional life also, through these learnings and conversations, we learned that he was an avid surf enthusiast, and he brought credibility with these founders as he'd worked with the footwear industry in a founder-driven company before. So these are just two examples of where getting to know the person made a much better difference on the fit and the stick rate for the successful candidate. These are two other recent examples. Yoga Works, where we needed to find a yogi, literally, and at Eddie Bauer, where we needed an outdoor enthusiast. The other thing that we do when we're conducting the client environmental is to work together to establish these key competencies. This is just a sample, but they're a wide variety of things that we can pin down that we're trying to determine with the client. We come up with these together with you by asking questions, but also it's an agreed upon roadmap against which we can measure the candidates we're presenting. So some of this is by just observation, in terms of culture, and some of this is by asking questions. So we do a lot of retail work. There are a lot of chief merchant searches within that, the chief product person. So, you might get at this by saying, is this chief merchandising officer going to be at 30,000 feet setting the vision for the season? Or is this chief merchant also going to be required to choose button level detail and know the SKUs within the assortment? Or do the buyers do that? You can get a lot of things around strategy versus tactics and a lot of other lines of questioning. And we choose this as a way to have agreed upon goals that we're measuring against, and I would encourage you to do this with your hiring managers as well, so you have a roadmap that you're measuring against together. The other thing that I think is really important is the blind referencing aspect. We'd like to encourage you to be really creative about referencing. We find that the list that the candidate gives us is likely the list that we throw away and don't even really pay attention to, although we do make some of those calls. This might be tougher for people in your seat because you may not have the ability to go back to, in our case, 37 years of contacts in one particular industry to reference, but you still have to figure out how to get to the blind references. I think this helps confirm the culture fit or not in another interesting way. So, some creative ways to get around this, I think, without jeopardizing confidentiality with the candidates you're looking at, is when you're interviewing to prompt questions, who did you work with and for at that company, and then follow that with something like, when I speak with them later, what will they say about you? And so the truth may be more transparent versus the selling these candidates are getting after with you trying to sell them on the role. The other thing on the off-list reference idea is that I think in our firm, we believe it's very professional to ask people their view on a number of people in a particular industry or functional set. And that doesn't mean that you're saying this candidate threw their hat in the ring and they're interviewing with us. It's your professional point of view on how 3 different VP marketing candidates in 3 different companies might be, and can you give me your point of view on these people? I think trying to get at the blind referencing is one of the most valuable tools that you can do in serving up candidates for your internal searches. That's really all I wanted to share on that, other than to tell you that, going back to the other slide, that Alex Smith at Pier 1, he drove the stock price from $1 to $23, and Dave Gatto did actually successfully sell Reef to VF. So those were successful placements for us and were great culture fits. So I provided a high-level strategy on defining the yardstick for competencies and culture, and Sacha's going to take over now, and he's going to give you a strategy on interviewing skills.
Great. So I am I'll give you a little background. I'm a leadership development consultant. I am not a recruiting consultant. I've done some engagements in the past around pre-hire selection. I've worked with an NFL team. I've worked with a big hospital network to help them identify C-suite talent, but this is not my niche, is not recruiting per se. but I think I do have thoughts that I can share with you that will be helpful as you are looking to vet talent. So what makes it hard? What makes it hard? If the ability to make good decisions regarding talent is the key differentiator, why? What makes it so hard for you?
You don't know the outcome.
You don't know the outcome? So you don't know if it's, and what outcome don't you know?
You don't know if they'll succeed or not.
Okay, so there's risk. There's some risk there. What else makes it hard?
People are always selling themselves to you.
Yep, okay.
Sales environment.
There. So there is the data valid, is basically, when they're putting their best face forward, how representative is that? It's like when we look at these presidential debates, okay, how representative is that of how, what kind of president you're going to be? So they're selling. What else makes it hard?
The environment?
I'm sorry, I heard environment.
Yeah.
The environment makes it hard?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I mean, the environment they might be working in the past and the environment that we have, or the culture we have, wherein they would be performing. So that would be a bit
Okay,
different.
so I find this fascinating, right? So his point is someone who works well in one organization may not work well in another organization. Even in something, so I've done a good amount of work in the sports world, even with a sports team. If you take someone who's got chemistry on one team and then you put them on another team, they don't do well there. So that also complicates it a bit. So we call this person-environment fit is really the question. And one of the things I've walked away from today in listening to you all talk is that is a question that's prominent for a number of you, is how do I figure out if these people are going to fit in our organization? So I'll call that PE fit, person-environment fit. Anything else?
Supply and demand.
Yeah, so there's competition over the best ones, right? Yeah, great. Supply and demand. So lots of challenges. That supply and demand, I'm struck that RecruitiFi is this is not a paid promotion of RecruitiFi, but I'm struck that RecruitiFi would help with this. But the identification of, is this person actually going to fit in the organization, that's on you all. That's on you all, once you've got the candidates. So if you look at the science around selection methods, it's kind of depressing. It's kind of depressing when you look at what works. Graphology, by the way, anyone know what this is? It's a study of handwriting, which is still used in France in some organizations. References, to Kristin's point, traditional references aren't that helpful. Most companies these days, they can just say, yes, they did work for us, or no, they didn't. So they're pretty vanilla. Our recommendation is a structured interview is the most powerful tool at your disposal. I'm sure you all are senior recruiting experts. You know this. You know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know about the structured interview. So we talked about this, what makes it difficult to predict what the person's going to be like. So I've got a little exercise for you. I want you to observe me, and then we'll talk about what you observed here. This is the skill I'd like you to take away from today. Okay? What did you observe?
Stressed, pressed for time, disorganized,
Hold on.
confused.
That is how I live my life. Stressed, disorganized,
Pressed for time.
Someone said confused.
confused,
Frazzled, late, maybe.
late,
Focus?
pressed for time. Oh, I got a positive one. Thank you. Pressed
Concerned.
for time. Focused. I got to get the positive one.
Insecure.
Okay, no right answers. No right answers, folks. The goal is to get responses on the left side. The question I asked you was, what did you observe? What did you observe?
She's focused.
What's that?
I said she's focused.
Pacing.
Pacing.
So those are judgments, right? And you want just
Exactly.
walking.
Pacing / walking. What else?
Rubbing your
Hand in the hair.
Sighing.
Maybe sweating. Looking down. Again, I don't know.
Okay, looking at watch. Great. Now, I teach this to executives around how to provide feedback. Okay? And when we look at how to provide feedback, the point is, don't lead with this. Don't lead with these. Well, actually, let's put the headlines on here. So you said one is observation and the other is
Judgment.
judgment. Yeah. So I'll call it observation and interpretation. Okay. Judgment works just as well. So when you're delivering feedback, you want to lead with this, and then go to the interpretation. Okay? But this isn't a discussion around feedback. This is a discussion around how do you predict who's going to be a successful candidate. And I think, well, actually, let me do one other thing before I get to the punchline. So hold that thought. I'm going observation, interpretation is the point I'm making. Next question I want to ask you is, how many triangles do you see in this little diagram here?
9. 0.
9, 2, 0. 0 is the target answer. 0 is the target answer. There are no triangles there. There are 3 Pac-Men, and then there's 3 Vs. Okay? Now, how does this relate to hiring? How does this relate to hiring?
We saw different things.
Everyone sees things differently. Exactly. We jump in and make interpretations. We go to this level. Even you all, as very talented, I would assume, very talented recruiters and interviewers, you go into this interpretation level. That's what you're getting paid for, is the ability to interpret the data. So how do you get good, precise data that is not so biased? Because that's the danger when you're going over here. Your biases are coming out. Oh, I like them. They remind me of myself. Like I can tell, I like to surf, so I would have liked that, the Reef CEO there. And we see that in people. They remind us of ourselves in some way. So you got to go with observation. And I've been doing some training with a large financial services organization where I'm training their managers on how to hire. Because that's critical, that the managers are making good hiring decisions, right? And the point here is to use what I call the SBO model in your interviews. Start with the situation. So this is a kind of simplified version of a behavioral-based interview. But I think, for me, behavioral-based interview gets kind of confusing. What exactly are we trying to do here? You want a previous example of this competency? What we're encouraging you to do here is have the person identify a situation in which they displayed a certain competency. Okay? Then you have the person indicate what are the behaviors. What are the behaviors that they demonstrated, that they did? And then what was the outcome? And the outcome is the equivalent of the interpretation. I strongly encourage that you write these down. If you're like me, your memory at the end of a day of interviewing, it's like, now wait, what the heck was that one person say versus, I even had it, frankly, I don't know if you all had this, when people were doing when we were doing the voting. The voting for the watch. At the end of it, I was like, wait, now who said what? And it ended up being not as scientific a decision as I would have liked it to have been. So write it down. I guess that's the other key point I would say. Write down the behaviors and the outcomes. And this helps you get a better understanding of what the candidate is doing that demonstrates these competencies that you're looking for. Okay? I have a little exercise for you. How much time do we have? 5 minutes? Okay, I've got a little exercise for you, for you to try implementing this. The question I'd like you to do is partner up with someone next to you and ask them to share a recent accomplishment that they're proud of. Okay? So it's going to be a little self-divulging here. Utilize the SBO model to understand this. So what did they do and what was the outcome? What you're going to find is that by utilizing the SBO, you're going to learn a lot about what the person's values are, right? Because it tells you why they were proud of what they did. So can we take 3 minutes and have a go at this? Okay. So I got a question for you. As you started to do the SBO, what did you find around getting into the behaviors versus the outcomes? Any ahas or takeaways at dividing things up? Tiffany?
Absolutely. So I think focusing in on the behaviors and separating those from the outcome is really important, but I think we were able to identify that a little better amidst the conversation, just asking follow-up questions to be able to dig out the additional information I
Yeah.
can.
Good. Okay. Yep.
It seemed to tap in, I did it, we both did it back and forth, so we interviewed each other. And it seemed to tap into what the person valued.
Right. Right. So you even get underlying value beside from just the behaviors. You start to understand the decision-making points along the way, whatever the outcome was. So I know this is kind of simple, but I think it's deceptively simple is what I would say to you. I remember one of my first gigs, I was in grad school, and I started doing work with the Giants. I started doing some work interviewing incoming rookies at what's called the Combine. And I remember I got an assessment result on one guy who was a superstar in college, and I interviewed the guy, and I thought, this guy's awesome. This guy's awesome. I really like the guy. I think he'd be a great fit with the Giants, culturally. They didn't select him, and he went to jail a year later, and he's still in jail. It was like a terrible outcome. It's one of the worst stories coming out of the NFL, I'd say, in the past 25 years. I love the guy. And here I am, I get my doctorate in psychology, and I think I'm like, Mr. Nostradamus in predicting people. And I've thought about it since then. Why? What happened? And what happened was I went with outcomes. I went with, he was selling, I think someone made the point around, I bought what he was selling, and I didn't go deeper and ask how, why and how questions. So if I'm going to leave you with one recommendation, it's ask how questions to highlight what their personal impact is in what they're doing. How questions are very powerful. And why questions highlight values and decision points.
Can you repeat that?
Yep. How questions highlight personal impact. So in other words, okay, you accomplish 85% growth in your department's revenue. How? What'd you do? So going that next level down, then you start to see what did they do, not what did the department do. What did you, potential executive or potential candidate, what did you do? And why questions, that helps you think about the decision points that they're making, or to your point, how are their values? What are their values? What's important to them? Again, nothing's going to make it perfect in terms of predicting talent, but this gives you a little bit more detail and meat to work with, I think. So offer that for consideration. And I totally, Kristin's point is the idea of blind references. Totally agree. I mean, if you can get insight into what the person's like on the job really, not the politicized version, that's great. That's great input. So I agree with her point on thinking creatively. Time's up. I just got to know time's up. So thank you.